Welcome, esteemed guests. We thank you for joining us for today's webinar on state of Pakistan's economic and security challenges, approaches and strategies. My name is Rameen Mufti and I'm a research officer at the Center for Law and Security. CLAS is a non-partisan policy research institution that aims to define the future of national security in Pakistan. We have with us our prestigious speakers, Dr. Aneel Salman and Dr. Usman Chohan. Dr. Aneel Salman is an expert on sustainable development, institutional governance, climate change. Currently, he holds the chair of economic security at the Islamabad Policy Research Institute. Welcome, sir. Dr. Usman Chohan is an international economist and academic. He is one of the founding directors of CAS and is among the top 10 business authors on Social Science Research Network. Welcome, sir. We are honored to have you at this webinar. We are also joined by our Executive Director, Mr. Imran Altaf. I would like to pose the first question. Pakistan is going through a grave economic crisis. According to experts, the GDP for the fiscal year 2023 is likely to shrink as low as 3.5%. Recent floods and political uncertainty have marred the country with rising public debt, expanding current account deficit, unprecedented inflation, and lower demand for domestic export in the subdued global economy. Recent developments are likely to inflict disastrous impacts on Pakistan's national security. In context of the current situation, I would like to pose the first question to Dr. Aneel Salman. Sir, how is it a barrier to Pakistan's economic development and what are its implications on the country's national security?
Okay. Thank you, Rameen, and Rahman sir, for inviting me. Well, you see that if you look at Pakistan economy very closely, so the general narrative is that things are not good, and there are certain reasons behind it. But again, I think it's more of pessimism that we are talking about, and we don't look at the brighter side. And I'll be talking about it also. But let me just first tell you that what are the reasons that why our economy is something like this, which it should not be. I'll be answering your question in three parts. Number one, that you talked about that the economic projection for 2023 is not that good. It's a little bit bleak as per IMF, ADB, and even what our ministries are saying. But yesterday, if you heard our finance minister, he challenged some of the numbers and he was showed a little bit optimism. Now, if you look at the economy of Pakistan, we have this, I think there are two problems. One is the structural issue, and another one is your cyclical problem. When I look at the structure of the economy, so we take GDP as one of the indicators when we're looking at the progression of the development of an economy. And there's a very simple formula which we are using, that GDP is calculated by consumption, investment, government expenditures, and the net exports. If you look at the projections of GDP, in Pakistan, it has been increasing, and the GDP growth rate may be negative during the COVID, but overall, the number of GDP has shown a positive increase. But this GDP is comprised of consumption, investment, government expenditures, and your net exports. So we can see that Pakistan is facing a chronic trade deficit where exports are less and our imports are much higher. So we have a trade deficit. So that point is going down.
Right.
Then looking at the investment, we see apart from the foreign direct investment, and we're not talking about the CPEC investments, the investment in Pakistan, calling both domestic investment and the foreign investment, they has shown a decline in Pakistan for the last 2-3 years. The last one is your government expenditures. So government expenditures, if you look at the PSDP, the budget allocations, that has declined. So the government expenditure are also showing the downward trend. So if you look at three variables, number one is your investment, number two is your government expenditure, and number three is your net exports. They are on decline. But as I told you, GDP ka number dobara phir bhi is increasing. So that is basically the structure of your economy, and all is attributed towards the consumption. And if you look at if there's 100% की अगर हम division देखते हैं, so the alarming number is that in Pakistan, the consumption, the only consumption is contributing around 96% is your consumption, which is huge. So you see that rest of the three variables are just contributing 4%. And all the GDP growth, all the GDP accumulation is because of the consumption. Yani 96% आप सिर्फ consumption कर रहे हैं in Pakistan. That is one major problem. If you look at our neighboring countries, India, China, Bangladesh, over there, the consumption is around 45 to 55% but in Pakistan, it's 96%. So that is number one problem, where we see that, okay, the structure of the economy is not doing well the way it should. Number two, there are three major sectors in Pakistan. Number one, agriculture. Number two, industry. And number three is services. Agriculture is contributing around 20%, or I'm not talking about this year, I'm talking about for the last 1 decade. पिछले 10 साल से the agriculture is contributing only 20%. The industry is contributing around 30%, and the service sector is contributing around 50%. Now you see, for the last 10 years, the structure of the economy has not changed. Your agriculture, industry, service are contributing the same kind of percentages the way it was doing it this year and the way it is doing it for the last 10 years. Right. So no matter how good human capital is, no matter you talk about youth bulge aa gaya Pakistan ke andar, kamal ho gaya, we have a very good human capital, it has nothing to do, it is not contributing towards, it is not contributing towards the sector. So our the sector,
right. I think Aneel, Salman sir, I think you made some excellent points. मैं इसी की continuity में the factors that you have outlined, मैं मेरा ख्याल है उस्मान साहब से ये जरूर पूछना चाहूंगा कि ये हम बार-बार जो है वो सिचुएशन तो है, हम आइडेंटिफाई कर लेते हैं, स्ट्रक्चरल इश्यूज हैं, पॉजिटिव्स क्या हैं हमारी इकोनॉमी के, लेकिन हाउ डू यू लिंक ये करंट अप्स एंड डाउन जो हमने रिसेंट ईयर्स के अंदर जो है वो देखे हैं, और अभी एक पेसिमिज्म तो है अबाउट अ स्टेट ऑफ इकोनॉमी. सो हाउ डू यू सी दैट विद द लिंक विद आवर नेशनल सिक्योरिटी, और is it in some way, does it impact our national security in some way, और वो कहाँ पर जो है वो करती है?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rameen. Of course, I fully agree with Salman Sahab. We have a common perspective on many things, including the structural issue. But things may not have been so bad and had itna asarandaz na hota on our national security if it weren't for a global polycrisis. Multiple crises arriving simultaneously. We could have probably continued 10, 20 years doing the same nonsense, and it would have been fine, but it isn't fine anymore. And that's why perhaps we have to address the structure. The impact above all on national security is that when a society faces precarity because employment, production, consumption, transit, transport, all sorts of factors related to the economy stop functioning, it impacts the lives of people and helps them behave or forces them to behave in antisocial manners. In manners that can be destructive to society as a whole. Desperation often leads to a calculus that is very short-termist, very destructive, and winner takes all. That is the psychology that is coming out. I don't really believe the crime statistics. I think they're always underreported because not many people bother reporting what they're going through. But everything seems to be worse in every city in the country. And that is because people have now a tendency to grab what they can. That is at the root of public security component of national security, because keeping your borders safe is fine, having the strategic arsenal is fine, but when there's blood on the streets, then you have a different problem, and then you don't have the same energies diverted to external threats. And external threats are not decreasing by any means. That is fundamentally the link between the economy, creating social stability, which then enables national security and allows you to then project power and accomplish your goals abroad. That's the fundamental link.
Right, thank you, sir. My next question is back to Dr. Aneel. Pakistan has endured an economic loss of over $30 billion from climate-induced floods that has affected more than 33 million people. Do you think Pakistan is taking the right steps to mitigate climate change and improve the country's national and economic security?
You see that first of all, you have to understand that when you're linking climate change with the floods, whatever natural calamity comes, first you have to understand that either it is because of climate change, there is a heat wave, we attribute it towards climate change. There is floods, we attribute it towards climate change. Indeed, it is one of the parts of it, but you cannot attribute the whole variable towards it. Climate change do play a part, but not it's just because of climate change. I think it's in Pakistan, it's more of the governance issue. We call ourselves Keji Pakistan is in the top 10 in terms of vulnerability, but we use it as a play card in terms of asking money from the donors. Then just coming on to the being a vulnerable state doesn't mean that you are recipient of this adaptation fund. It is you have to submit your proposal. It is vetted. It is a competitive grant. It is not just that you are vulnerable, so you have to get the money. Now, we brought this case of loss and damage in Sharm el-Sheikh also. Another adaptation fund, and another fund has been also been established. But looking at the global efforts, I don't think so it's sufficient enough. Pakistan needs to have a development model, which I say that it has to be a climate compatible development. Whenever you are making your budget allocations, whenever you are bringing any development projects over here, the climate needs to be make a part of it rather than treating it in silos. Pakistan ka ek aur jo bada problem hai, that is that we are suffering from the policy paralysis, that you have your water policy, you have your climate change policy, you have your national security policy. All these policies are made in isolation silos, and one policy is not connected with another one. So more of it attributing towards climate change, I think we need to look at our governance model, that how the policies are being formulated and especially how the policies are being implemented. If policies are implemented in a proper way, then I don't think so that we need to make these cases, because you know that every year floods come. Karachi is a victim of every August mein abhi is saal phir se honge, but are we doing anything towards it? So the answer is that we haven't done much. और जब कोई इंटरनेशनल क्लैमिटी जब कोई इस किस्म की क्लैमिटी आ जाती, then we say, oh, we are the victims of it. हमारी carbon emissions less than 1%. We know that our carbon emissions are less than 1%, but it is not because we are not doing manufacturing, because as I said, that manufacturing mix तो आपका change ही नहीं हो रहा पिछले कई सालों से. So you are not attributing much into the carbon emissions. But the point is that you have to make your development in such a way where climate is synced into it.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. With regards to this, I would pose the next question to Dr. Usman Chohan. How do you view the situation in context to the entire with regards to the climate financing and the current economic situation of Pakistan in regards to economic security? And when should we expect this economic situation to improve in the future?
For the global economy, I think you will see a lot of trouble for the next 24 months. There is a lot of surplus money that had been slushing around since 2008, and now it's being retracted by rising interest rates in the US. The dollar has become strong, and all countries are a victim of that, including us. So that's the global. On our side, all of the structural factors that Salman pointed to are correct. And in addition, I'm seeing very bad signs in the places from where we would generate the surpluses. We would generate the surpluses from imports for taxation, right? But we are holding back the imports, and the state bank has become a kind of broker for the dollar. So it's not allowing every bank to get everything done. So imports aren't as high as they would be. And on the current account side, the exports are going to be lower for the next year, because right now, because of an energy problem, as well as a demand problem abroad, you have many factories shutting down. Our largest tractor manufacturer, for example, closed shop yesterday. And about half the factories, this is anecdotal, but about half the factories in Faisalabad are shuttered down. So this is where you would generate employment. It's where you generate your export revenues. That would be down. And the other place you would get foreign exchange in a normal fashion is through remittances, and the global economic slump abroad is impacting the diaspora abroad, so they're sending less. So because of that, what you may see as a tough 24 months abroad ends up being a tough 36 months here, 3 years of hardship. Now, how do you address that? Well, the sorts of things that the government is trying to do, it's a decent effort, but until you address the structural problems that Sir Salman mentioned, you can't get very far. And the problem is that right now, politics plays a big part. The politics also plays a big part in national security. And until everybody is on one page, you can't do that. I'm mentioning this because there is now a discussion about a technocratic government, which would mean that you have people like Sir Salman or me, people like us, taking the brunt of the difficult choices because no politician has the courage to take them themselves. So basically, if you look at like Mexican culture, they have these toys, piñatas, and you hang them and you tell the kids to beat the piñata, Sara gussa us pe nikal do, and they want technocrats to come and be the piñata so the awam can bash the piñata instead of blaming the politicians. This piñata mentality is the supreme form of cowardice, and it doesn't reflect the values of the people, and that's why the people cannot come to one page.
Experts. Anisa, I'll start with you. ये जो हमारे अभी बात हो रही है that we might go into a situation where Pakistan will be defaulted. अभी government has assured that we are not at that stage and probably we have हमारे जो external debts हैं उनको हमारे पास कोई 3 महीने हैं कि हम उनको जो है वो संभाल सकते हैं, चला सकते हैं while we are trying to arrange for other donors and lending some more money. So God forbid, अगर हम उस सिचुएशन के अंदर जाते हैं तो व्हाट डेंजर्स डू यू सी? क्योंकि रिसेंटली हमारे यहाँ एक बहुत एग्जांपल जो है वो दी जाती है, वो ये दी जाती है कि पाकिस्तान इज गोइंग टू बिकम श्रीलंका. सो क्या, व्हाट विल हैपन?
देखिए, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल यू नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड कि जब हम कहते हैं कि जो डिफॉल्ट रिस्क होने लगा, देयर आर सर्टेन सिम्टम्स. यस, वी आर showing that symptoms, but it doesn't mean that we are going for default risk. I relate it more onto the political economic debate. कि जी, yes, we are an import dependent country, हमारा trade deficit बहुत ज़्यादा है, there is lack of foreign exchange stability है, inflation बहुत ज़्यादा है, BOP crisis है, ये सारे symptoms आपको default risk की तरफ लेके जाते हैं. But if you see that when the 8th IMF review was going on, we had lots of like news narratives that Pakistan is going to be the next Sri Lanka. Abhi jisna aapne bhi zikr kiya. But the moment the same economy is there, but the moment 8th review was passed, nothing of that sort happened and everything was normal. Now we are getting towards the 9th IMF review, and I think we create that uncertainty in such a way that once you are on the table in terms of the discussion and the negotiation, you are in such a fragile state कि आप कहें कि जो आप कहते हैं, we are ready to accept it and kindly give us the money. And it's just $1 billion. But you also need to see what is the composition of this debt. Or 60% आपका China और Saudi के साथ. The IMF debt is only 20%, and rest of the 20% is just bilateral and multilateral donors. So just for 20% of the loan, आप एकदम default risk में चले जाएं, I don't think so that it is going to happen. So
you feel कि इसमें speculation जो है वो ज़्यादा है, हमारे political narratives का हिस्सा जो है वो ज़्यादा है, rather than being an actual threat of a default.
बिल्कुल सही आप कह रहे हैं that looking at the economic numbers, sometimes economic numbers doesn't reflect, as Dr. Chohan has said, that in Pakistan we understate or we sometimes overstate things. और पाकिस्तान के अंदर जब ये reviews आते हैं, why the economy gets bad? This is my question to my fellow colleagues. कि जी जैसे ही review आता है, the economy is in shackles. But जैसे ही review आपका हो गया, आपको 1 billion की tranche मिल जाएगी, things are going to be the same. आपका डॉलर के अंदर अनसर्टेनिटी इस वक्त आई हुई है.
उसमें एक सिचुएशन क्रिएट होती है where it feels कि we are flirting with being default, or we brush shoulders and then we come back and our economy has been in constant state कि जहां पर हम जो है वो उस लाइन के बार-बार वो जो प्रेसिपिस होती है उसके बार-बार पास जाते हैं, फिर जो है वो वापस आ जाते हैं.
बिल्कुल देखें, that is that we reach the brink and then we again come back. लेकिन what we have to understand is कि जब आपको लोन मिलता है, and may it be IMF, may it be any bank, there are two things. एक आपकी होती है country ceiling. When you're dealing with the donors, they have already established that country ceiling, और उस country ceiling को हम increase नहीं कर सकते. For example, IMF has said कि पाकिस्तान के लिए 10,000 हमने रखा है, they will never give you 50,000. एक आपकी country ceiling होती है. नंबर 2 आपका होता है दैट इज योर क्रेडिट एक्सपोजर. पाकिस्तान का क्रेडिट एक्सपोजर, डेट आपका जैसे जैसे बढ़ रहा है, द क्रेडिट एक्सपोजर इज इंक्रीजिंग, एंड द मोमेंट यू टेक द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द कंट्री सीलिंग एंड द क्रेडिट एक्सपोजर, वी गेट द हेड रूम, और हेड रूम इज द अमाउंट ऑफ मनी दैट यू गेट इन टर्म्स ऑफ योर लोन. सो पाकिस्तान का जो हेड रूम है विद द पैसेज ऑफ इयर्स वो क्या होता जा रहा है, कम होता जा रहा है. Looking into the why we are always going 23 times हम IMF के पास गए हैं. I'll just finish it in one line that you have to look at Pakistan शुरू से ही we have been earning the geostrategic rent. Afghan war की वजह से and later on after 9/11 हमें geostrategic rents आ रहे थे. So we were comfortable in terms of borrowing money, but the moment that geostrategic position has changed, or the Washington says that we don't need Pakistan anymore, जिसमें अभी जो national security policy आई पाकिस्तान का कोई जिक्र नहीं है, and we are now trying to make up our position क्योंकि Pakistan is still geostrategic important. That's why we are facing this kind of problem. Otherwise, I think so if you look at the situation of loans, तो वो आपके headroom की वजह से आता है. It has nothing to do.
उस्मान साहब, what is your take on this? देखिए, अभी ये इशू जो है वो हमारी नेशनल सिक्योरिटी कमेटी की जो मीटिंग है उसमें भी डिस्कस हुआ. पहले मैंने आपसे पूछा था तो यू मेंशन्ड राइटली कि ह्यूमन सिक्योरिटी जो है वो हमारे लिए जो है वो बड़ी जरूरी है. बट अगर हम इस पर्सपेक्टिव से देखें, वेयर हमारी मिलिट्री लीडरशिप, सिविलियन लीडरशिप और ये सब सर जोड़ कर बैठते हैं और डार साहब जो है वो ब्रीफिंग देते हैं that this is the issue, this is an issue which might impact our national security, और खुदा ना खासा अगर हम डिफॉल्ट हो जाते हैं तो उसकी भी जो है वो देखा जाता है. जो हमारे पास जो रिपोर्ट्स अभी तक जो है वो आई हैं, हाउ डू यू सी दिस इम्पैक्टिंग पाकिस्तान? एक तो करंट स्टेट है, और फिर यहाँ से आगे जो है वो दो रास्ते हैं. यहाँ से आगे एक रास्ता ये कि हमारी इकोनॉमी बिल्कुल ठीक हो जाती है, हम दोबारा जो है वो थोड़े स्टेबलाइज हो जाते हैं, और दूसरा रास्ता ये है कि वी गो हेवायर. तो हाउ डू यू सी कि यहाँ से आगे हमारे लिए जो है वो रोड जो है वो क्या है, और फिर द लिंक अगेन विद द नेशनल सिक्योरिटी इन ब्रॉडर पर्सपेक्टिव, जहां पर हम नेशनल सिक्योरिटी, एक मुल्क की सिक्योरिटी की या स्टैंडिंग की जो बात करते हैं.
It's an excellent and profound question. I build upon what Sir Salman is saying. Then there is a lot of narrative building that goes along with this, and the competition for narratives makes it difficult for even the people sitting on the national security panel to be of one mind. We need the whole country to be of one mind. And although you do correctly say that there's one path and another, for me, there is only one path. And that path is the path to stability, because I cannot imagine, and even people in Washington cannot imagine what the other path would be like. It is simply inconceivable what that would mean. Sri Lanka is a very...
There is no chance of us becoming Sri Lanka, or...
I just cannot conceive the consequences of what that would be like. You see, because Sri Lanka is a tiny country, doesn't have the footprint we do. We are the world's 5th biggest population, pretty much. We are a nuclear armed state, and we negotiate proverbially with a gun to our own head. Okay, right? It's like a very sadistic way to deal with geostrategy, and it makes everybody nervous, including us. And the narrative part I must emphasize again is that, what Sir Salman was saying as well, is that the way that we are dealing with it is the pessimism is infused into society. That is part of hybrid war. And in that pessimism, including by stakeholders here, that pessimism then leads to blame shifting. इन्होंने तबाह किया उन्हें जी इन्होंने तबाह किया है. And right now there is a fever pitch in society, which means that they're looking for somebody to blame, and people sitting in the National Security Council are very nervous about the domestic condition as well. What that means is that they reach out to data, but the data doesn't give a comprehensive picture. For example, the credit default swap was the indicator that they were using to say that, wow, Pakistan's default risk has gone up to 90%, used to be 5% 2 years ago. The fact is that the credit default swap has three problems. One is that it's a poor measure of risk. If it were a good measure of risk, we wouldn't have had 2008 financial crisis, right? Because it doesn't capture risk very well. The second problem with the credit default swap is that Pakistan's credit isn't very liquid. It isn't largely traded, so it doesn't give you a clear indicator of what it is. And the third is that it's just a mathematical calculation, and the inference that you draw from basically reworking the credit default formula is really up to you. Just because it's 90% doesn't reflect the reality of society. So I don't believe that we will default. God forbid we did. I couldn't imagine the consequences, and that's why.
Salman sir, the political decision making, because we need to take right decisions, and the decision makers are politicians at the moment. In any case, so we have one party which is going to say we will stay in government no matter what. चाहे हम पॉपुलर हैं अनपॉपुलर हैं हमने गवर्नमेंट के अंदर रहना है no matter the cost. Second party is who wants early elections no matter the cost, and they are willing to go to any length and blame it all on the government. So these are two extremes. And like we have discussed कि हमारे political narratives के अंदर polarization और एक pessimism जो है वो है. So do you think the current setup, whether it politicians कह लें उसे पाकिस्तान की establishment कह लें पाकिस्तान के decision makers कह लें, name it, वो हम कोई भी नाम उनको दे दे, but as the state are we ready to take the right decisions? क्योंकि ये तो चीज पूरी दुनिया में चल रही है. We are saying that the world is in a difficult spot, and so is Pakistan. So do you see that happening? Your concluding remarks, आगे जो है वो आपको नजर आ रहा है कि हम ये फैसले ले लेंगे?
देखिए, this political problem is not new. Whenever अगर आप पाकिस्तान की political history देखें, so we have been playing this musical chairs. एक party आती है, दूसरी party कभी अपना tenure नहीं पूरा करती है, and we have this rapid elections, and the same thing is happening at the moment. Maybe अब जरा different tools के साथ आ गए, and there's digital awareness and all that. So what the present government is doing, I think they have initiated this charter of economy, that no matter what political party comes in or political parties go out, we have this economic trajectory and we are not going to twist and turn with this economic trajectory. And abhi, since last year 2021 we have initiated this dialogue with different stakeholders कि जी आप charter of economy पे बात करें, where the economic progress does not hamper. Rather ये जो है political वाला, in political with the politicians, the problem is that IR people, I call them IR when I'm looking at from the economics, from the national security, or national security की जो last meeting हुई है उसमें भी उन्होंने जो fulcrum का है कि economic security is the fulcrum that can twist and turn about Pakistan economy, and stability has to be the main pinnacle. Problem with these politicians and these IR people is that they have no idea with the economy. वो सिर्फ economy को जब deal करते हैं, it is in a very non-expert manner. अब economists ये हैं, economists जब number को देख रहे होते हैं, वो उस political reality से बहुत दूर जाके वो ceteris paribus में देख रहे होते हैं. So there is a very strong disconnect between the IR, which I call as the politicians, which I call them as the policymakers, and the economists who are living in their own world, who would just say, जिस तरह भी Dr. Chohan was saying कि जी हम अपने credit default के ऊपर एकदम परेशानी हमने कर दी that Pakistan is going to be at the default, is because though both parties are not understanding what it is. You need to have the dialogue between the two, and you need to understand that economy is not going to be fixed in 5 years. Pakistan का एक और अलमिया ये रहा है कि हमारा जो इकोनॉमिक साइकिल है वो पॉलिटिकल साइकिल के साथ सिंक करता है. Whatever the political party comes, हमने 5 साल के अंदर इकोनॉमिक रिफॉर्म्स करने हैं. We are not going beyond than 5 years. If you look at China, if you look at India, they go 20-25 years की planning.
Very short term goals.
Yes. So हमारा जो problem ही है, that is short termism. We are very myopic. We have to look in terms of 100 years, 50 years, तब आप पाकिस्तान के अंदर economics.
अच्छा, my team is texting के time जरा थोड़ा कम रह गया है. So मैं डॉक्टर चौहान से ये concluding remarks जो है वो लूँगा. चौहान साहब, अब ये जो चीजें हमने जो है वो डिस्कस की हैं, हमारे नैरेटिव्स का भी इशू है, बट वन थिंग व्हिच इज वेरी होपफुल लर्निंग फ्रॉम यू टू जेंटलमैन दैट पाकिस्तान इज नॉट, मतलब ऑल इज नॉट लॉस्ट. वो जिस तरह से कहते हैं ना कि जो पैसिमिज्म जितनी है और वो उतनी ज्यादा जो है वो नहीं है. सो यहाँ से आगे वन प्रॉब्लम दैट वी हैव आइडेंटिफाइड, और हमने उसको बार बार लिंक किया पॉलिटिकल इंस्टेबिलिटी के साथ. और हमारे पॉलिटिकल नैरेटिव में ये है कि पाकिस्तान में इस वक्त सबसे ज्यादा जो जरूरत है टू सेट द इकोनॉमी राइट इज व्हाट यू नीड इज पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी. आई नो इसके इंटरलिंकेजेस जो है वो बहुत ज्यादा हैं. बाहर हमने देखा है कोई गवर्नमेंट से काम नहीं होता तो वो गवर्नमेंट छोड़ के चले जाते हैं. जैसे ओके फाइन वी आर लीविंग, लेट द नेक्स्ट गाय कम. ब्रिटेन में हमने देखा प्राइम मिनिस्टर चेंज हुए, प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स हैव रिजाइंड एज वेल. सो हाउ डू यू सी दिस? पाकिस्तान के कॉन्टेक्स्ट के अंदर वाकई पॉलिटिकल इंस्टेबिलिटी इज एन इशू व्हिच इज हमारे कह लें कि इस वक्त व्हिच इज एलिंग आवर इकोनॉमी एट द मोमेंट.
Precisely. Give you an optimistic tenor on which to end our discussion. In 2021, I was feeling very triumphant. We were coming out of COVID. We had 20 billion in reserves, even as late as August 2021. And I felt that it would be a new episode in our history and we'd march forward. And since then, you know what has happened. And suddenly there was a despondency. In the same turn, you can bring up that triumphant optimism again if you do certain things. I'll say it in the abstract. The first is that you have people in charge who reflect the will of the people, one. Two, those leaders then say to the people, now we are going to take tough decisions. Are you with us? Three, the people say, yes, we are with you and we will hunker down for the long haul. Four, we make those changes and the people then, after a period of sacrifice, realize their fuller aspirations. 4 steps. That is really in the abstract how easy it can be, inshallah.
All right. Ji Rameen, over to you.
So I think with this, after this interesting conversation, I think we should call it the end of the session. This is the end of our interesting conversation. I would like to express my. Sorry,
thank
sir?
you, Usman.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, if anybody, Sir Dr. Chohan and Dr. Usman, if you would like to add something to your closing remarks before we end the session.
Nigel, thank you very much for this insightful conversation, and I hope we can have more.
Thank you, Ji. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
बहुत शुक्रिया.
Thank you.